Well, welcome. Tonight, we find ourselves in the middle of the silly season, the season where we're going to take and vote. And I hope that all of us are going to vote. Anybody who's watched the show before, all 6 people, will know that I've promised never to ask you to vote for any specific candidate, but I'll beg you to vote and to have an educated vote. So there's a number of different opportunities. This show is one of them. Kevin Rudden and Al Holman with the Courier will be another. The Milford Town Crier has that show where they'll invite candidates. The Senior Center will have it, and even the high school, which I absolutely tip my hat to, is the students at Milford High will invite the candidates to come up. So there's a plethora of different opportunities for you to get to know them, and that way you can pick somebody who you believe will best serve you. Now here, tonight, we're going to talk about school committee. And again, anybody who's watched the show will know that I believe it's the most important election we have. Not trying to take anything away from the selectmen, but anybody who's had children, you know that you're lucky when they get to high school if you can have 2 hours a day with them. People on the school committee are going to decide how the kids spend 6 to 8 hours a day and what we do to ready them, to train them, to go to college and for the rest of their lives. So we're going to start right now with an introduction.
Hi, my name is Justin Dulak, and the reason I'm asking for your vote this year is because I'm the candidate who's running to hit the ground running. I have the experience in education stemming from my education in education. I went to college and studied it. I worked as a substitute teacher in the Milford Public Schools, and now for the last 3 years, I've worked directly with the superintendent and the school committee of Sudbury Public Schools. So I have a vast amount of experience in the field that I'll be able to bring with me to the school committee this year. But that's not the only reason I'm doing this.
Well, then we'll start with the first question I always ask. Justin, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, I'm a born and raised Milfordian first and foremost. So building on my experience, I also have a lot of passion for giving back to the district. And that stems from my time here. When I was growing up in the Milford Public Schools, they made me believe they were a community through their actions. And specifically, I want to tell you a little bit about when I was in high school. During my junior year, in November, right before the wrestling season, my little sister Jill was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. And as you can imagine, that threw my family into a state of disarray. My mom had to stop working. She had to start taking Jill in and out of Boston to the Children's Hospital for treatments. And somehow, despite that, excuse me, it's a little hard. Despite that, she managed to put together the money to let me participate in wrestling that year, the one thing I really loved doing in high school. Well, a couple weeks into the season, the athletic director at the time, Nick Zakili, he pulled me aside, offered his deepest condolences, let me know he was there for me if there's anything I need, and he gave me a little envelope. I didn't open that envelope right away. I waited till I got home. And inside was the same check my mom gave the school for the participation fee. Now, it was only like $100, $120, not the biggest amount of money. But when she couldn't work and we were begging our landlord to for help with the rent, that little gesture meant all the world to us. And then a few years later, the district doubled down on that. When Jill took a turn for the worse and she became terminal, it became clear to everyone the only thing she had been hanging on for this whole time for was to try and get her high school diploma. And she really started to decline around January, just a few months before she would have graduated. Well, the district and the school committee waived the remaining graduation requirements, brought a cap and gown into her hospital bed at Children's Hospital, and did a little ceremony right there. The image of her and Bob Tremblay and Paul Mazzucchelli in Children's Hospital awarding her that diploma is something that will last with me for a lifetime. And one of the reasons I'm running tonight is to try and give back 1/10, 1 iota of the pleasure and the relief that they gave Jill, my family, and I on that occasion. It really is my motivating cause today.
You got me. But that's Milford. That's what makes our town the center of the universe.
absolutely agree. It really, yeah, just gave me a real community feel. It really helped it transcend from just a school, someplace where you have to go day after day, perfunctorily, and it made it something real. It made me feel like I was something bigger, and I just want to make sure every student that passes through Milford High School these days gets that same feeling.
When you look at the school, what do you think the 3 biggest challenges that you would face on the school committee?
Well, first and foremost, sorry, I'm still recovering.
No, boy, you get to me too.
First and foremost, there is the challenge that's a little bigger than Milford, but it's something Milford has to deal with as well. And that's a challenge of evolving into the challenge of change equality into equity. Ever since Brown v. Board of Education in the 1950s, schools have been pursuing a equality education. We need to transcend that and develop the 21st century education built around equity. And to help illustrate the difference between the two concepts, I have a little parable and a little illustration that I want to tell you about. What I want you to imagine are 3 guys trying to sneak a view of a baseball game from beyond the outfield fence. One of them's really tall, he can see things just fine. The other guy is a little bit shorter, he can see, but not that great. And then there's a third guy, he can't see anything at all. So what they do is they go and find some boxes to stand on. As you can see, in an equitable or an equality approach, all the guys are standing on the same size box. It puts the first guy way over the fence. He's almost falling over. The second guy, he's got a decent sight. He's all right. Third guy still can't see a thing. So what do? They scrap the idea and they go back to the drawing board. An equitable approach, the tallest guy, he doesn't need a box. He can see things just fine. He gets rid of his. Second guy, he keeps his boxes he was seeing just fine in the first place. The third guy, he stacks on both boxes, and now he's got a side of the field. And everyone's on the same level playing field. They all get a view of the game. So what does that mean for education? It means we need to give differentiated and personalized education to all of our students to help them transcend their socioeconomic and racial backgrounds, any baggage they may be bringing into the school. Their education has to be tailored to them. And as a school committee member, we can pursue this in a variety of different ways by making sure that English language learners have the different headsets they need and different softwares they need to learn English. And we can make sure the athletic programs offer the same opportunities to girls as they do for boys, whether that means integrated sports or parallel sports. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. I was actually really proud of the school committee this year when they didn't endorse the idea of blizzard bags. Blizzard bags are the idea that a teacher will create an assignment ahead of time at the beginning of the school year or somewhere there along in preparation for a snow day. And in that occasion, when a snow day is called, the students will already have their lessons with them and they'll just do those at home. And the snow day will count as a school day instead of tacking on a day at the end of the school year. That's a great idea in theory, but it doesn't provide the same education as being in school for that day. A student who needs a little extra help won't be able to get that level of help. And any student that needs services won't be getting those services. So we're really denying them a day on the calendar. So I think it's as blizzard bags are currently constituted, they're not an equitable decision, so we shouldn't be endorsing them. I think that's the first challenge facing Milford Public Schools and really all schools these days. It's developing an equitable education for all students. Secondly, I think the facilities are a major issue here in Milford Public Schools. Last year, the school committee partnered with NESDEC to do a comprehensive study of all the school facilities in town. So they looked at everything, Memorial, Brookside, Woodland, Stacy, and the high school. And I think the results were alarming. If you look through the report, a stunning number of the parts of Milford High School are original to its construction in the 1970s. You're talking about the HVAC, the windows, parts that are absolutely fundamental to a kid's education, because if they're in the middle of winter and they're going through sea wing and it's freezing, they're not going to be paying attention to their studies. They're going to be trying to figure out how to put on another layer and keep warm. So I think, and we have major issues at Stacy Middle School as well, where that hasn't been renovated, and I think this is the 25th anniversary. I think it was 1994 that it was last renovated. And if you don't have the proper maintenance plans, 25 years becomes a very long time. So we're looking at either major renovations or replacement of both of those facilities. And one thing I'm happy to see is that there is a long-term planning facility committee that's meeting, and that's going to have a meeting next month that I plan on attending. But we need to have a larger conversation as a community about what to do with our facilities, because there's a lot of things we can do once we open up this Pandora's box. You can start looking at grade configurations. That's one major debate in education right now. How many different ways that you can align your schools in terms of grades? Do you want to have the model we have now where we have a couple of elementary schools and they feed to a middle school and then they feed to the high school? Or do you want to reduce the number of transitions, which in idea or in theory would allow students to focus more on their education so they're not distracted by trying to learn the different layouts of a new school so often, and have a junior senior high school? If you pursue that route though, where do you put it? How do you manage that? We only have so much land to work with. Another thing you'd have to consider in any of these situations is sustainability. That we should be trying to reduce the carbon footprint of any new or renovated high school. So do you want to put solar panels on the roof? Do you want to put solar panels over the lot? Do you want to have a compost bin out back? What do you want to do in terms of that to try and save money first and foremost, because solar panels generate so much, but also to just do the right thing by the environment to help battle climate change. So it's just a big conversation we need to have as a community, especially even on a more fundamental level, just because it's going to be such an issue for the taxpayers. Whether we get state reimbursement or not, we're going to have to front a lot of cash to get these new facilities either built or renovated. So we need to start talking immediately about the state of our facilities and what we're going to do with them going forward. Third, last but not least, I think we need to have a deep and serious conversation about school start times. The biological research is clear that teenage students, middle schoolers and high schoolers alike, are on a different circadian rhythm than their elementary school counterparts. They are wired to wake up later and stay up later. I think anybody who's been a teenager or who has had teenagers is well aware of that. I can see it with my nephews, they live in Mendon, but they're up playing Fortnite all the time now, and they sleep in later too. But getting back to the topic at hand, we need to get the school start times to recognize what is going on in their bodies. As it's constituted right now, where we have teenagers going to school earlier than their younger counterparts, it's actually harmful to them. It's working against their natural body rhythms. Now, we can't just willy-nilly change the school schedule. There's a lot of components that go into this. I know this firsthand from my experience in Sudbury. It's something they've been debating for about 2 years now. You have to consider bus schedules, athletic schedules. You have to consider
work schedules
for high schoolers too, yeah. There's a lot of different things that are going to go into this decision, but it's a conversation we need to have because the science is clear that the teenagers operate on a later schedule than their younger counterparts. So those are the three big challenges I'd like to face as a school committee
If we
member.
look, take middle one, facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we just finished Woodland. And we were coming off, when you think about it, for 13 years, we saved money, renovated Brookside, added on inside the high school and Memorial, and then saved up money so that we didn't have to use profanity. None of those 2.5 override things or debt exclusions. $61 million for Woodland. Now, we've been talking about there's a new school coming, which is the high school. I remember well, May of '74, that was the first class out of the new Milford High School, because I was in it.
Yeah, but I was just a couple years behind.
So you start thinking about, we're coming up on our 45th reunion, scary as it sounds. A lot of us still believe the Milford High School was built as a bunker and it'll stand as a bunker. So taking it down and building a new one, I don't know how it's practical, because where would you do it?
That's one of the things that I think we need to start having a major conversation about, because we're having land gobbled up all over the community, whether it's by Warehouse Depot or any of the apartment buildings we've authorized. We're eating up all the land around town at a very fast clip. We need to start talking about where we want the high school. I think the NESDEC plan said it would be on the same site.
Yes.
I'm not sure how they'd arrange that. I haven't seen any blueprints or anything. I don't think those have been released.
At first they said you could do like Woodland. Now Woodland is a much smaller footprint.
Yeah.
And we took and put the new school on the soccer field on one end of the area, and then tore down the old one and built a soccer field. But there's just not enough room on that site for the high school.
No, you're talking about, you got the Brookside right behind it, just within a couple hundred yards almost. And then you got the brand new renovated athletic fields. And then you got that one little lot back there.
Yeah, you're not going to fit a whole new high school. And there's nowhere to put 1,200 kids. I mean, when we did Brookside, it was 300 children, and we had to build half a school. You know, now what I have heard is that it would be feasible to build a new wing and then move A wing into that, renovate A wing, move B wing, you know, just do a shuffle.
Yeah. This is all the talk that we need to have as a community. What do we think is the best approach in terms of immediate concerns, such as where are we going to put the kids, where are we going to put all the facilities, and long term, is this really the right move for the next 50 years? If we're going to invest this much capital, should it be in a renovation project where we're going to have to keep it up over a shorter period of time, or should we do brand new? But there are a lot of challenges that come with brand new.
Well, again, brand new, coming up with $200 million.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard, you know, recently in the paper they talked about a long-range building committee, that every 5 years we do a new building. I'm not sure that the School Building Association would fund a new school in Milford every 5 years. So that means we would have to pay the whole
100% tab, yeah.
I mean,
and that's a lot. Even if you're only talking about Woodland, Memorial or Brookside, that's going to be a...
Well, Woodland was almost $30 million, our money, out of 60, okay, that we paid. Coming up with $50 million for the high school, or another $50 million total to do a next school right behind it, I don't know, how would we afford it?
Well, that's one of the things. I just saw a debate on Facebook, of all places, not the greatest, but I saw it on there just the other day. Somebody made a post about, well, we have one of the lower per student spending rates in the area. Should we put more into that, bring that up? Would you be willing to do that if it meant higher rents, higher mortgage, property tax rates? And it devolved, as you could imagine, anything on Facebook devolving. But that's essentially the crux of any of these arguments. Is it comes down to a tax argument. What are we willing to pay for? But the key to it all is we got to do targeted spending. We got to make sure that no matter what we spend, we have to make sure it's smart in the short term and the long term.
And I'm still struggling with those numbers because I hear that we're spending much less than other towns, but yet we're spending 60 some odd million dollars. We have 4,300 kids. Simple math says it's about $15,000 per kid. And then you hear the people saying, well, no, we only spend 40 million. Well, let me ask you, do you think we're budgeting properly when the health benefits are paid for by the town for the teachers? The bonds are paid for by the town for the buildings. So that's two factors that we break up. The third one is SPED and ELL. We'll get into questions on that. But we break that out separately and pay the net. Because students coming in can bring a big bill with them.
Oh, absolutely. But we just have to make sure that whatever we're spending, we're doing it in ways that impact our kids the most. That's my core belief.
But if you would ask the school committee, don't you think they'd say they are?
Well, you got to look at every line item in the budget, and you have to make sure that what you're spending it on are the programs that we need that are most impactful. For instance, whenever you want to make a decision about which programs to cut, you want to make sure it's a data-driven decision. You want to make sure that whenever you're going to consider cutting a program, you want to have the participation rates. You want to take a look into whether it's enriching the curriculum or not. You want to hear from all the stakeholders in the community, and you want to make a decision that way. Whenever you talk about the budget, that's what it's all about. You want to make sure that you're hearing from everyone, and you're making sure that the project and the product is helping the students.
But now, it would be wonderful if you could take the emotion out. But I remember years ago when we were holding the budget tight, because the town was on restricted income for a year. I had heard that they were considering taking the hockey program out because it was too expensive. And I went to the superintendent and I said, seriously? You know, because football costs a lot more than hockey. And it was, well, we have to pay for all the things on hockey. I said, we do too on football, but it's buried in the parks department, it's buried in this. It's, how did you pick hockey? They said, oh, candidly, it's the most vocal parents. And when they hear that we're cutting out the program, they're going to fight to get us more money.
Well, yeah, this is something that I have a little bit of experience with. My first year in Sudbury, we actually had a budget shortfall, and we had to go through and decide which programs we had to cut. And the very first thing that we tried to cut was the youth orchestra program. But the parents let us know that that was valuable to them. Through phone calls, through emails, we heard from them. So we had to go back to the drawing board and we had to decide what else could we do. And so we ended up making a bunch of administrative cuts instead. But the thing that you need to remember is every cut's going to hurt someone somewhere.
Exactly.
And so on the administrative end, for the last couple of years, we haven't been able to offer teachers the same supports that we normally would. And then that bleeds down to what they're able to do with their students because they're not able to focus as heavily on their students.
So what did you take out?
Well, we lost one of our business clerks, I should say. We lost her, and then we lost the administrative assistant to the assistant superintendent. That got folded into my job responsibilities. We lost one of the administrative assistants in the student services department, so that got folded all into one person. We didn't have an assistant administrator for student services at the time, so all the special needs programs got put onto one person. But it was a lot of administrative cuts. And that just ended up having a deleterious effect on everything we did throughout the district because it was so much more on each person in the central office. But that's just the thing. No matter who you cut, what you cut, it's going to hurt somebody, whether it's directly in the schools or in the offices, and it all impacts what's going on in the schools.
Well, let me ask you a fundamental question. Do kids in Milford school system get a good education?
I'm sitting here today. I like to believe so.
Now, what year did you graduate?
2009. So it was a little while ago now. There has been some turnover, but I'm proud of what I see coming out. I got my cousin in the high school right now, and I've never heard him say a bad word about it. I mean, he's a little frustrated sometimes with homework load, but that's every high schooler, I feel like, who's taking a lot of APs and whatnot. But I think we're doing a lot of the right things. I sit on the Principal's School Improvement Council at the high school, so I work closely with Josh Otlin once a month, every month. And I like a lot of what's going on there. I know one of the initiatives that he's been working on over the last few years has been building up the hands-on programming that they're doing at the high school level. So you have kids that are partnered with Milford Federal, I believe it is, to do actual banking, cash transactions, withdrawals, deposits. You have kids that are doing real shop classes again. That wasn't present when I was there. So they're learning CAD. They're actually building things. He's looking to introduce a BioMed program. He's giving kids the opportunity to really learn with their hands in a way that has really been absent for a long time in education. And that I think is going to be tremendously valuable in making them more competitive with their counterparts from other communities once they graduate and either go into the workforce or if they go into college. It's going to make them much more competitive. And another initiative that he wants to push forward is altering the school day slightly to make it easier for kids to pursue external internships and apprenticeships for credit at the high school level. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. We should be getting our kids out and getting them real experience. It's only going to help them after graduation day. Even if they're just trying to decide what they want to do, to be able to eliminate something even is huge. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. And I think if we continue pursuing that, I know one of the things we were going to talk about tonight is school choice. If we offer these programs that are more competitive with what they're offering at BVT and they're offering at Norfolk Aggie Tech, we're going to keep kids coming here, or keep kids in the district. And then if we really expand our offerings, if we build a school that can give shop classes the actual space they need, because that's one of the major issues right now is that we have sawdust flying into computers. We're going to be able to eventually not just staunch the bleeding, but actually I think even bring in kids from other places because we're going to offer programs that aren't in those other places.
You've hit on about 4 different things that we'll expand on. But why don't we start with I've always had a pet peeve. People like my father who came to Milford, not academically inclined. You know, if you put him in an organic chemistry class, he's not going to do that well. Put a tool in his hand. He was an artist. When I was at Milford High a few years before you, just a few, Paul Revere and I used to have this discussion at the media center. But if you have somebody in 8th grade today, they're making different choices. Because for us, if you wanted to go to college, you went to Milford High. If you wanted to do a trade, you went to BVT. But today, if you're not in the top 10 or 15% academically of your class, you ain't getting into BVT. You know, it's not an option. The kids that are saying, hey, I'd like to be a craftsman, well, if they didn't do really well in the academics, they can't meet the criteria to get in. What do we do for the kids? They are not dumb.
Oh, by no.
You know what I mean? My father was incredibly intelligent because he could do things with his hands that, to this day, I inherited all his tools. You know, the tools won't sing the way they did in his hands.
No tools sing in my hands, so I can relate.
I have all the tools, they're there, and you get nothing. Are we doing enough for the kids like my dad?
I think we're moving in the right direction on that front, yeah. Because as I was explaining, we're starting to offer the programming that's really been missing from our curriculum for a long time. And we're starting to allow them to go out into the community and get real life experience in the trades. And really in any business they want. I know one of the companies that the high school has partnered with in the past has been Waters Corporation. If we can send kids there and let them learn on site, that's going to be tremendous for their personal and professional development. And it's going to look great on a resume. So I think if somebody like your dad, if he was going to school today, he'd have more options at Milford High School than we've offered in well over a decade.
Now, one of the candidates has come on, and he believes that we're not preparing our children for college, that half the kids we send to college fail. Is that your experience?
Every person I know that, I mean, it's anecdotal, of course, but every person I know that graduated from Milford and went on to college also graduated college. Now, whether that translates into a larger sample size remains to be seen, but I think we're giving our kids a robust curriculum that challenges them, and we're going to start seeing that more and more the more we invest in the right programming. But as I was saying before, it really comes down to targeted spending, making sure every kid gets an individualized and personalized education, something that if we're pursuing an equitable education, we're going to nail in the head to, well, mix all the stuff we've been talking about.
But now, one of the things you brought up was school choice, and that's become a hot topic because it's costing us $500,000+ a year. And a lot of people don't understand that by law, the Gazinta and the Gazauta don't match. Any money we bring in, anybody coming in, the Gazinta goes to the school budget. But the kids leaving, the Gazauta comes out of the town budget. So you're not really giving the school a net. They get all the income, and the town pays by reduced cherry sheets, the tuition, let's call it, you know, the allocation. How do we stop that? I mean, what do we do to get more kids to stay?
Well, it all comes down to not putting lipstick on a pig. We can't just print up a brochure and say Milford High School is the greatest place on earth. We actually need to build out our programming. We need to offer the programs that are going to make kids stay here, whether that means more shop classes and more banking classes or more stuff like that. We got to make sure we're offering what they want. So if we do that, we're going to keep kids in the district.
Now, some of the parents have come out and they'll actually say what other parents are thinking, that they're worried that with the large immigrant population coming in, that their children's education is going to be stifled or slowed down. Did you find that?
No, I think if you look at the MCAS numbers, that doesn't bear out, but we can talk about that a little more later. I think whenever you want to start talking about immigration in Milford, there's one fundamental fact you need to keep in mind. Since the middle of the 19th century, Milford has always been an immigrant community.
Absolutely.
To see that, you don't need to look any further than St. Mary's and the Irish Round Tower in St. Mary's Cemetery. Both were built by the same Irish priest who wanted to just have a piece of his homeland here in America with him. Then you look a little bit down the street, you have Sacred Heart and the beautiful Italian neighborhood that grew up in the early 20th century. Then a little bit later, you got Prospect Heights and the Portuguese Club and the beautiful soccer field and playground up there. And now you'll go all along Main Street and you have all kinds of great restaurants and shops and whatnot from our Central and Southern American community. Really, I view immigration as an opportunity for Milford. If we truly embrace that, we can transform the education that our children are receiving. We can do that in a lot of different ways. At the elementary school level, you could easily have just World Heritage Days where you bring in different dishes from where you're from. I know when I was in 3rd grade, we did something like that. I brought in stuffed cabbages for Poland, and the kid brought in mofongos for Puerto Rico. It really helps kids learn the different cultures and learn that we're a melting pot society. And that if you wanted to really pursue an ambitious goal, you could do something like what Menden's doing with a Spanish immersion program. I know my niece is involved in that, and it's helping her learn what is increasingly the new lingua franca, no pun intended, of the United States, Spanish. And if you do that, not only will you be teaching kids that new language, you also have an opportunity to help the social emotional development of some of the ELL learners who might otherwise feel marginalized. Because it's their native language, they could act as a leader in their classroom to help the other kids learn Spanish. So I think if we truly embrace the immigration, as Milford always has and always should, we have an opportunity to really enrich our curriculum.
Do you think it holds back the potential of the non-ELL, non-SPED kids?
I don't think that there's any evidence of that whatsoever. If you look at our MCAS scores, all the ELL learners are learning right at about state level. So I don't think there's any reason to think they're holding back.
Well, I think what people end up bringing up is that our average MCAS scores and all are lower than some of the towns around us who don't have a large immigrant population.
Well, I think that gets into one of the first things you learn about in college, which is causation versus correlation. I don't think there's any sort of connection, or at least proven connection between the two. I'd be interested to hear any data linking them. But
well, you know, I just remember when my daughter hit middle school East, it was 8th grade, that I walked into the principal. I don't know if Tommy Davern was still there when you were there.
He was superintendent. He stood behind me at an 8th grade speech.
And I asked him, point blank, and I knew I'd get a reaction because I was on the school council, the parent council. And I said, Tommy, why do your MCAS scores suck? And sure enough, Tom, that was his world. Middle school East was something that you could see the pride he took in. And he looked at me point blank, he said, because you're ignorant. I said, great, educate me. And sure enough, he brought out the data that showed our top kids were very different scores than the kids who were just coming in to learn the English language. And we saw a bimodal distribution. The top kids were doing really well, as good as any. And he said it. He said, I'll put our top kids against any town around us, and we won't come up short. But it's not fair to take somebody who maybe had no education or doesn't speak English yet, put them into an English test, and expect them to do as well. But when they report the average, sure, that bimodal distribution becomes a different looking Gaussian curve. Yeah. And our numbers overall are lower.
Well, yeah, that's just one of the issues with the reporting methodology, not necessarily the curriculum here in Milford. That seems to be an issue with the test, something maybe that's at the state level beyond our control here at the local level. If I'm on the school committee, we're going to be crunching all of the numbers. I have a couple of charts in here I'll get to a little bit later, but I don't think that necessarily the ELL kids or even the special ed kids, I know a lot of communities try and blame the special ed community for dragging down test scores and for all sorts of budget issues and whatnot. That's not the right thing to do. I think we need to try and look at what actually is causing these issues and look for actual causation.
Well, when you look at the budget, we have a very different budget model in Milford, where people sometimes don't understand that ELL programs and SPED programs are mandated. So these towns that hand the superintendent and say, here's $100, that's your budget. spend it any way you want. ELL and SPED has to come out first.
Yep.
So if you get 2 or 3 extra ELL kids come in, even with circuit breaker, you
There
could,
comes down the budget.
there comes down, and the budget for the typical kid suffers. Now in Milford, we really didn't believe that was a good model. So we have the district, the school district, show us what they spent last year, what they're going to spend this year in ELL, and we fund the delta. Because it's only been one time in 13 years that it's ever gone down. Every year it goes up. And then we go after the management and say, okay, you got 2-point-something% on your normal operational budget. But that, in my mind, keeps the ELL and SPED spending from affecting the typical kids.
Well, I think we're actually, if we're in a budget discussion, one of the unique things we're at this point in time is we have the opportunity. The state on Beacon Hill, they're starting to look at the funding formula again for the first time in 25 years. What we should do is we should bring in Ryan Fatman and Brian Murray to a meeting of the school committee. We do this in Sudbury. We invite the state representative and state senator to come and just have a discussion with the school committee. Let's talk about what we need to hear from them, what we'd like to see go on Beacon Hill, and what they need to hear from us to make impactful decisions on Beacon Hill. So where they're looking at the state funding formula, we can give them a lot of feedback and a lot of input on what that new formula should look like if we just have a legislative form. And that's one thing that if I get on the committee this spring, I'll be looking to do. I want to integrate the different levels of government, both here and on Beacon Hill, and then even within the community. I would love to invite one selectman to a school committee meeting every couple of weeks, so they can know before budget season hits, before we come with this big budget, what we're working on this year, what our priorities are. I think just trying to bring everyone together is really a great mindset to have.
And I mean, realistically, we're fortunate because Brian, our state rep, was on the school committee for many years,
Yep.
and then a selectman for many years. Ryan, from Sudbury, Ryan Fatman just came on the show to talk about how they're looking at the formula. So as he felt the sensitivity that we do have a larger percentage of ELL and SPED kids than a lot of other towns, and we're being penalized.
Well, if there ever was a time to look at the different mechanisms and figure out what the proper funding formula should be and the proper way to fund these programs are going forward for the next 25 years, that time is now. Let's take advantage of it. Let's start today having a conversation with our state reps, state senators, and everyone within Milford.
Have you looked at the recent investment in a Milford SWAT type team?
Well, I know they launched it last year. I read the stories in Milford.
Yeah, one of the things that we ran into was we're part of a regional SWAT team. It takes 40 minutes average to get the SWAT team to your school. And the average incident was over in 18 minutes. So it was rather frightening to think that we're going to have a fully operational, equipped SWAT team showing up 20 minutes after
it's already over.
It's over. So we hired, and for us, for a little town like Milford, we spent $700,000 to put 3 SWAT-trained officers in the school system. So of the 4 schools, we've got 3 roaming the 4.
Yep.
And now we've reduced response time to, let's face it, if you're in Brookside, it doesn't take a long time to get to the high school. Or to Memorial.
Nope, everything's nice and close.
Or Stacy. So what do you think of the idea that we had to reinforce our police department?
Well, I think right now, school safety is one of the #1 concerns in not just Milford, but the rest of the country. We've seen a lot of really disturbing things happening ever since Sandy Hook, it's hard to believe, almost 10 years ago now. I think whatever investments we can make in security, we should be doing. So that might have been a heavy price to pay, but there's no price heavier than a child's life. So I think whatever we can do in that direction to protect our students, we really should be doing.
And that was, I remember looking at the chairman, and we looked at each other and said, if we don't vote for this and something happens, how would we ever face a parent?
Yeah, it's not even about votes at that time. It's just about facing yourself in the mirror, facing a
Yeah.
parent. That's a really hard choice to reckon with if you don't support something like that.
Now, as we talk about budgets, you know, I always kid the superintendent that they face the problem of too much money and not enough to spend it on, and watch their reaction. But there's always an issue that comes up. We could always use more money in the school system, and in police, and in fire. But how do you feel about profanity, like 2.5 override and debt exclusion?
Well, I think the easiest way to avoid a situation like that, let's invest in something like a grant writer, somebody who can look into finding more first temporary and then more sustainable ways of funding all the different ideas that our teachers have for how to educate our students, or can find different ways to fund new construction or renovation. That somebody whose entire job is to do that. It'll be much easier to hire someone who's skilled in grant writing than it is to convince the community to do a 2.5 override, or it would be to find the funding over the course of 30 years to float a bond. It's a little bit of an investment up front, but it'll pay off in the long term in terms of just the dollars you'll bring into the district and the frustration saved.
So when would you reach for an override, or would you?
It all depends on the it's entirely situational. Going back to my situation in Sudbury that year, we had to ask for an override even with the cuts that we made because you just didn't have the budgetary flexibility. You always, if you do your budgeting out far enough, hopefully you can try and avoid those situations. But if you're ever in that situation, you just have to go back to the community and have an actual plan. This is going to be a one-time override. We're going to do this once. We're not going to encounter again. Here's the data that shows that. As I was saying before, you just want to keep making data-driven decisions.
So now you start looking at data-driven decisions. Where would you start? What programs would you look at first to improve the schools?
To improve our schools, I would want to try and survey the community. I've given you a couple ideas tonight. I want to definitely invest in some of the apprenticeship programs that we discussed earlier, and I want to add in a Spanish immersion program. I think that that's going to be huge to make our students more competitive in the future, because more and more we're facing a world where you need to be at least bilingual, if not trilingual, to get a lot of jobs. I know the high school is hiring a trilingual counselor right now. Imagine how in demand her services must have been. Spanish, Portuguese, English. So I believe it was. Don't quote me. It was about a month ago I was at that meeting. So we're due for another one next week. But it's a trilingual counselor who can help those kids. Just think how in demand she must have been and how much a little bit more she could probably make because she has that knowledge. So if we're thinking about where to invest funds, that's one area I'd really like to look into.
Now you brought up areas like biotech and others that are open. I ran into a situation a little while ago where I was up in Sea Wing. And as I walked in, I said, wow, look at this place. It's just like when I was here. And then I really thought about it, and I said, yeah, it looks just like 43 years ago. One of the hottest drivers of our economy in Massachusetts is biotech and biopharma. Why aren't we spending more money on specific programs to help our students in the biotech field?
Well, that's one of the things Mr. Otland is looking at right now, is he wants to implement a BioMed program at the high school level where kids will start getting actual experience in the field. They'll start learning in the classroom what BioMed is all about. They'll work on, I don't want to talk about the specifics of it because I haven't gotten that far with him, but he's working on that as we speak. So I'm actually very encouraged in that direction, that our kids are going to be more prepared to go to nursing schools and to go to some of the more competitive doctoral programs.
But even if you went into being an operator, I mean, one of the issues we had when we built a plant up in Worcester was getting enough qualified biotech operators. And these weren't, I mean, these are BS or BA with a science degree, but you know, bachelor's level or high school level with some experience. But that was 55, 60 grand a year. So it wasn't a bad income to start.
I didn't start making that till recently. So, no, I completely agree. That's the sort of future we want to set our kids up for. And I think we're very quickly moving in that direction. And I want to completely support Mr. Otlin in his ambition to do that.
How do you feel overall about the management of Milford school system?
I think we're in fairly good hands right now. I like the direction we're going in. If you look at how our test scores are, for the most part, the student growth percentile, where you normally want to be in like a 40 to 60 range, we're right there on math in the mid-50s, right there in English in the mid-50s, while our kids are scoring most proficient or higher. So I think we're moving in a little bit of we're moving in a good direction, and I'm very encouraged by that.
Now, I promised to let you bring in your charts.
Yep, that was a couple I was just mentioning. We have the math scores right here for 10th graders. You have the median student growth percentile on the bottom, and on the y-axis over here, you have the percent proficient or higher, and the little dot indicates where they intersect. So if you look, we're actually doing fairly well in math. We could be doing a little bit better, but on the English, where we have really good progress being made, where we have almost 60, we're in the upper 50s for growth percentile, and we have almost 100% proficient or higher. We want to keep encouraging those sort of results. And there's a few different ways you can do that. You could hire a grant writer to find additional funds and whatnot, as we discussed earlier, and allow teachers to give a more personalized education. You can also do something like Watertown did, where they did a curriculum assessment realignment, where they took everything right down to the nuts and bolts from K to 12, and saw their test scores increase by 18% the next year.
What's involved with that?
Well, like I say, it's when you allow teachers more time to collaborate over the summer, and they really take a deep look into the curriculum and see where any gaps might be in what they're teaching between grade levels. And once you do that, you start filling in the holes, and the kids will learn more in a steady progression. So,
well, I've been pretty happy to hear about the AP courses offered.
Mm-hmm.
Because in '73, back then, we ran out of science courses. And a wonderful man, probably one of the most dedicated people I've ever seen to the kids, Paul Raftery, was principal. Mm-hmm. And he actually called 3 of us in and said, okay, we have a problem with the 3 of you. We don't have courses to keep you busy. So he sent us to Dean Junior College for chemistry and biology. Now, we were lucky. I had a car, not a very nice car, but it was a car. My Malibu got me to Franklin and back.
I had one of those.
Yeah, but today, it seems like we have incredible courses. You know, the classroom that they participate in with kids across the country. And how do you feel about the AP courses we offer?
I think we're doing a fantastic job with AP courses. One thing that I actually heard about at the high school level recently was that we have a couple students who maxed out on their math offerings. They took the AP courses, and they're only juniors. There was an initial plan to offer them in their senior year to continue challenging them. Mr. Allen has them setting up with software that they're going to be able to go on that gives them courses at a college level, and he's working with colleges to make sure to start offering classes during the school day that the kids will get college credit for. So we're building on the rigorous AP curriculum that we offer, and we're giving kids a little bit more beyond that too, to make sure that they're starting to get that leg up in college so that they don't have to take all their semesters. I know I benefited from that. I got to graduate a semester early because of the AP
Did
classes.
you really?
Yeah. Because of the classes I took here at Milford High School. I took AP American, AP Euro, and I was able to graduate a semester early because of that.
Well, that's worth $30,000 right there.
That's why I made the choice. They pulled me into the office and said, hey, you could save all this money, or you can stay another semester and get a few extra credits. Wasn't a hard choice. But we need to continue offering kids those opportunities, and I think we're doing a great job with that so far. And I think we're getting back to the equity argument I was making before, we're still offering more challenges for the kids that are able to complete courses beyond that, and that's key too.
Now, you graduated just a few years ago. The kids in your class that you knew, and granted the samples, the N is not going to be huge, but what was your feeling on, were they getting into the colleges they wanted?
For the most part, yeah. I have most of the people I knew, and again, there's going to be a confirmation bias because I went to college. Most of the people I knew went to college. But Yeah, most of the people in my class that wanted to go to college went to college. As again, there's an attrition rate, of course. Not everyone graduated, but for the most part, everyone I know went to and graduated.
Did you have any feeling for the kids who didn't graduate? What was the overall reason?
I didn't find
I'm just curious if it was financial, because
college is ridiculously expensive right now. We need to find more ways to offer kids support there, but that's another story entirely.
Well, I just remember when I graduated, 78 Holy Cross, it was $6,200, and I was like, my mom worked at Draper, making $11,000 a year. Dad worked at General Motors, making $18,000. So I was absolutely amazed that they could pay $6,000. And yet, Emily, my youngest, was over 60.
Yeah, that's right on where my wife's college tuition was at Roger Williams. And we're lucky that she had the Christian Herder Scholarship available to her from the state, and that she qualified academically for a variety of other loans and grants. And I lucked into some of the same situations that because of my grades, I qualified for the President's Loan Incentive Grant, which was a loan that turned into a grant if you stayed and completed your degree at Suffolk. And that reduced my debt load. But I have friends who are still digging themselves out of that to this day.
How do they dig out? I mean, when I graduated, I had $32.80 in my pocket. But I didn't have, I'm hearing $80,000 worth of debt.
That's not an exaggeration. It's a true generational problem. It's one of the reasons why the millennials are stuck a little bit behind, where we're buying homes at a slower rate while we're starting families at a lower rate. My wife and I were fortunate that we were able to put together a down payment and get a home just a couple of years ago. But if either of us were single, that never would have been the case. We never would have been able to afford that. It's just one of the real true sociological, and I think it's bordering on political challenges that our country faces right now, is how to help the millennials get out of this rut.
Well, we're starting to see some of the local colleges, the smaller liberal artsy colleges, struggling or closing their doors because there have been, Holy Cross is $68,000. It's amazing to me that so many people come up with the money to pay for it.
Well, there's even having a trickle-down effect where state schools are becoming much more competitive in terms of enrollment, or admissions, because so many kids that would normally have gone on to a more prestigious elite or private school are now going to
private school, $250,000, UMass, 120.
Exactly, and then if you're one of those students, you probably qualify for the John Abigail Adams Scholarship, so you're probably paying a little bit less even below that.
But even then, they'll pay half.
Yeah, but it's any help you can get right now.
Half. You think about graduating. When I graduated, I didn't have much, but all of a sudden, I got to pay for a house. I got to pay for a car. And I got lucky because I went to work for a little company back then called Waters, and they gave me a company car. So that was one less thing I had to deal with. And since I was traveling so much, they paid most of my food. It worked out well. But I didn't have a $100,000 monkey on my back that, if I got to pay $1,000 or $2,000 a month just for that,
that's going to take a huge bite out of your budget. It's one of the things we really need to start tackling. We need to start helping our kids figure out ways to fund alternatives, and that comes down to things we're doing at the high school level, such as these college classes during the school day at lower rates. It's just what we need to look into to help kids going forward.
So now we'll take a minute to learn, who are you? Tell us about your family and Milford and why you're here.
Well, yeah, I'm a born and raised Milfordian. I was born at Milford Whitensville Regional Hospital before it grew out into the big thing it is today. I grew up in its shadow on Oliver Street. I went all the way through the public schools, and now I'm running to give back to my community. That's my modus operandi to this day. I benefited from Milford education. I benefited from the Milford community, and I want to give back to the Milford community. That's something I believe in with every bone in my body.
Now, you're obviously living in Milford.
Yes, I am.
Why would you choose, you left Milford like I did, and then you came back.
It all comes down to the community. I knew And I've got a house on Mechanic Street, right near Main Street, because I loved going down Main Street when I was a kid. I went to my old haunt was TJ Collectibles and the Music Nook. That's where I spent most of my afternoons when I was a kid. And I wanted my children to have that same opportunity. But it also comes down to the Milford Public Schools and the school environment that I grew up in. I knew all of my teachers cared about me. And that resonates with me today. Just the other day when I was outside Stop and Shop collecting signatures to get my name on the ballot, one of the women I was talking to, said, "Don't you remember me?" I looked at it, I was puzzling my brain for a good 5 seconds. "I was your third grade reading teacher."
Oh, God.
And my face lit up. I was like, "Mrs. Allman, how are you?" And we had a few minute discussion, and it was one of the brightest moments I've had in a long time. And that's really just why I got into education in the first place, why I studied it in college, why I wanted to work in it so bad. It was just that relationship you build.
It's amazing how the teachers in Milford, because when I came back to Milford, my daughter made it to 8th grade. Anne-Marie Longo came up to me and said, "Do you remember what you told me about French?" And I was like, "Oh, God." Because I looked at her and I said, "Why am I studying French? I'll never use French. I never want to use French." She goes, "By the way, where did you just move back from?" I said, "Paris." But it had been 30 years, and she still remembered.
Yep, exactly.
The comment.
That's just what I love. And when I was doing some student teaching observations, the first person I went to was Miss Tominski, my old 6th grade history teacher.
Barbara.
Yep.
Who was my next door neighbor
on
88 Water Street.
Yeah.
Her brother Richie and I were together all the time because they lived at the top of Water Street and we were the next drive down.
Yep. And she welcomed me right into her classroom. She was at middle school east by then, but I did a full day observation with her, and then I was able to go back to high school, do some more observations there with PJ Boschem, my old wrestling coach and teacher. It's just, when you go through the Milford Public Schools, you build relationships that last a lifetime. All my friends that I have now are friends I made in high school. My campaign chairman, Adam D. Costanza, is one of them. Nick Rando, a guy who's helped me with my campaign. They're all friends I made in high school. And it extends to the teachers as well.
So now, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Again, there are a couple reasons you should vote for me. First and foremost, it's my experience. I'm the candidate running to hit the ground running. I've studied education. I've worked in education. Now I want to lead in education. And beyond that, I'm a born and raised member of this community who has done a tremendous favor by this community. And I just want to repay that as much as I can for as long as I can.
Well, thank you. And to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for joining us. Please get to know these candidates. Pick the one that you believe best represents your views. And then I'm begging you, get out and vote, because that's critical. And as always, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for volunteering to help our kids.
Thank you for having me.
Not too long since I've been home.